Welcome to the Transformation series on Eternal Paradigm. In this series, you will hear stories from people who have transformed their lives. Have you worked out what your life's purpose is yet? What makes you tick? Are you living a fulfilled life? What is your calling? Are you actually listening?
If you do not pick yourself up and make some major changes that your soul is screaming at you, but you know what? You don't want to listen. You're going to be in a place you don't want to be in. And you know what? The universe brings you the answers, Urmi. It really does. And lo and behold, you won't believe the answer was a yoga teacher training course.
Welcome to the Eternal Paradigm Transformation series. Welcome to Eternal Paradigm 2021. So we're in January and this is the launch of the Transformation series. The Transformation series is really to show stories of individuals who have transformed not only their lives, but also decided to do something that has been a transformative process for them and for all those who they come in contact with. So in keeping with that, in this episode, I am joined by an amazing energy who is just filled with so much. I'm going to say amazing again. So she's just filled with the most beautiful energy and a true connection and calling to her soul. So as you heard at the beginning, Rina Rawal has had some trials to get to where she is today, and it's still not plain sailing. But having said that, she is an amazing being, not only to know and to be around, but to hear her story of how she went through life to become a yoga teacher. So in January, most people are looking to try something different, try something new, or potentially take up a form of exercise. And so if yoga is one of them, I would really urge you to listen to this, because I am not that person who can contort myself into a million different ways. As for the clothing that yoga has become kind of known for, yeah. You know, for anyone who has any physical hang-ups, I want to say, about not taking or not doing a certain form of exercise or not doing a certain form of anything just because they feel that physically they don't fit, the mold, I really, really urge you to listen to this episode, because for me, it's been amazing. But I know this energy and I know how amazing she is. But I really hope that it opens up a door for you, an opportunity to actually really begin the process of connection to yourself.
I'm Rina Rawal, and I'm just really delighted that you've invited me to speak with you tonight.
How could I not? You are one of the main maestros in my life, who is the all-knowing, all-being, all-seeing in anything to do with yoga. No pressure.
I was going to say that's loads of pressure, but thank you. I'm receiving with gratitude your lovely words. Thank you, Urmi.
No, this is really exciting, because we're going to go on a little bit of a journey, a little bit of an exploration of your story and how you have kind of, come on to become a yoga. Is it a yoga teacher or a yoga instructor?
I call myself a yoga teacher.
A yoga teacher. Perfect. I'm intrigued, and I'm just going to have to throw out their questions. And there are already some questions that we have pre-discussed.
Yes.
But I'd also invite you to throw out there some questions that you have as well, because I think that's incredibly important for you to be able to put questions out there that you felt or thought during your journey, and it may resonate with someone who's listening who might be kind of going on their journey.
Totally agree. It's very important to question the whole process, really.
Definitely. So let's start with, how long have you been teaching yoga, and how long had you been learning the principles of yoga before you became a teacher?
So I've been teaching yoga since the last 6 years, for the last 6 years, and it's been a really interesting journey. But the thing I want to say to you is, even though I've been teaching since that period, I've not arrived, and I don't ever think I will arrive in this lifetime. But that's a positive, because it means I'm always going to be learning. And for me, the whole process of yoga started around the age of 16, when my spiritual teacher's helper or disciple did a few yoga sessions with us. And it just felt so familiar, Urmi. Like, had I experienced this before? It felt like coming home.
That sounds amazing. And what I am really fascinated with about what you've just said is, firstly, you said you haven't arrived. If you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Of course, I can. Do you know what? I don't think you ever become fully a yoga teacher or a yoga instructor. I think what you become are iterations of yourself, and those iterations are improvements. They're improvements at each stage as you go through all the little challenges and sort of situations that you face. And I think if you think as a teacher you've arrived, something's not right, because none of us know everything, and none of us will ever also fully understand another person's experience. And that's the key thing to remember, that, we're all individuals, we're all unique, we're never going to fully understand how someone else feels, but we can empathize with them. And I think as a yoga teacher, you are always learning at every moment through your own practice, but also through your journey with your students. And that's what I mean about never arriving. And the other thing I wanted to add, Urmi, is I don't think that's a negative. I think it's something to be celebrated, because I don't think that we should be ever talking about perfection. There's imperfection, and that's what's so beautiful. We have to recognize and value that there is imperfection, and we should just be aiming to be better versions of ourselves. But that doesn't mean perfect. I hope that makes sense.
That does. I am a walking, living, breathing example of imperfection. I am. It's okay. That does. That makes absolute sense. And I connect with what you've said on so many levels. So many levels. What I also find quite fascinating is you talked about your spiritual, did you say spiritual master, spiritual guru?
Yes.
Can you share a little bit more about that? Because you were 16 and you were kind of introduced to yoga, and you said it felt natural. It felt like you were coming home. What happened? What was the feeling in your body? What was the thought process in your mind? And what was the feeling in your heart at that point?
Those are wonderful questions. Do you know, I don't know about you, but I wasn't very sporty at school, and I don't think I was very connected with my body. And like many teenagers, I think there was an element of me rejecting my body, because I didn't like, like many girls at the age of 16, I didn't like this and I didn't like that. And, my best friend looked better than I did, and all those silly things that, we think at the time, and they're so important to us, was how I would have been feeling. And I know I would have been feeling like that in and around school. And then when my spiritual teacher, my guru, visited the UK, which he did often when I was growing up, he had somebody that came with him who is like his right arm, if you like, that does everything to facilitate so that he can do his job of reaching people in another country. And he decided to hold some yoga sessions. And all of a sudden, it's like it didn't matter that I couldn't throw a ball, or I couldn't run fast, or I couldn't throw a javelin, or I was rubbish at hockey, or whatever it was. All that mattered all of a sudden was that I was moving my body in a way that felt natural and comfortable. Although it was new, of course, because I didn't know what asanas or yoga poses were, it just felt more aligned to me. And then that whole concept of, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to align the breath with this, and this is not a punishment. It's not like running around the field at school. It's not a punishment. It's a pleasure. And I was so excited about practicing that after he showed us a few of the moves, every day for the next few weeks, I practiced a little bit every day. And it just felt so good. And in my body, I think what it was I was actually feeling comfortable, which I think is a difficult one for a teenager, to feel comfortable in their body. But also, I didn't feel the pressure of comparison because I was in the room by myself, in my front room, in my little front room in my mother's house, mum and dad's house. I was just doing yoga, and there was nobody to tell me I was doing it wrong, or I was too fat, or I was too thin, or I was too this, or I was too that. I was just, it was a case of me, myself, and I. And I think that just made it plant a seed. I think that's what it did for me. It planted a seed within me of how I could feel and how my mind and body and breath could somehow work together, which I don't think was something I thought about prior to that.
That's so powerful, because it covers so many different areas that, you're talking about the physical ideas that we all kind of develop around our bodies, the social constructs that we then beat ourselves with. And yet you at 16 were able to embark on something that actually taught you the value of the movement of your body and your breath, which is something that we've almost forgotten about unless you're taking part in something like yoga. So just coming on to, so from that point, what happened until you started, I guess, officially training? Was it an immediate process, or was it something that you waited for years down the line? Can you fill in the gap?
Yeah, sure, I can. Well, do you know what? Like all teenagers, I suppose, and maybe I'm being a little bit generalistic there. I played with yoga on and off for a little while. And then once my spiritual teacher, my guru, went back to India and we no longer had his physical presence and that of his disciple who was teaching us, it kind of pitted away, which I think is natural, actually, because I didn't have any other yoga influences in my life. No one in my family was practicing it. None of my friends were practicing it. So it kind of just took a backstage for a very, very, very long time. I mean, I was 16 then. And then it reared its beautiful, angelic self to me in my 30s. And it came at a really, really odd time because I started to practice Tai Chi, of all things. A local place here near where I live in London, I started practicing Tai Chi and I totally loved it. I loved the slow movement of the body, the slowness of the breath, and the spirituality. That was a really big thing for me. I mean, I am a spiritual being. I think I've known that ever since I was tiny enough to sing my first prayer or hum along or just move my body to it, to the sounds of it. And so I enjoyed the Tai Chi a great deal. And then I hurt my back and I couldn't do Tai Chi for some time. And then I was expecting my third child, my third daughter, and someone suggested pregnancy yoga to me. And all of a sudden, this whole thing of, oh yeah, do you know, back then when I was a little girl, I really did enjoy yoga, didn't I? I thought, you know what, let me give it a try. I was nervous about it because I was thinking about all those beautiful yoga bodies all twisting into different directions. And I was fat and pregnant, and how would I manage? But I went all the same. And oh my goodness, I wish I could put it into words. It's a bit like seeing life in black and white through my other two pregnancies. And then all of a sudden, somebody switches on the color. It literally was somebody switching on the color of pregnancy yoga to me. And that intense connection and love I could feel with my baby, my unborn baby, and all the movements. Every time we did certain yoga poses or listened to a Tibetan bowl or particular music, my baby would flip around, but it was pure joy. There was a connection between me and her. And that was then the rekindling, if you like, of my yoga flame, which had all but everything burnt out to nothing. And then, the yoga came and went. I practiced a little bit, after she was born. And then there was this whole thing of managing 3 children. I had, 3 children, 5 and under. And I just struggled. I struggled with trying to get to a class and have childcare and all the rest of it. And then I spoke to one of the yoga teachers I was regularly then trying to get classes with and asked if he would let me bring my children. So a few years had passed. I mean, the little one is sort of like, I think 4 or 5 by then. And he said yes. He said yes. And I think that was one of the most important turning points. I was being accepted with my children. I didn't have to leave them at home. I could bring them with me. And to me, that gave me hope that I could pick up the practice. But also, I think, young mums, when you're busy and you have children, you lose a lot of confidence, you lose a lot of body confidence. And what you don't need somebody doing when you're in that space is kicking you when you're down, if that makes sense. You actually want somebody to extend a hand and help you up and give you ways in which you can navigate complicated parenthood and looking after 3 whole new souls as well as looking after yourself. So that really helped me with my yoga practice. And then from there, it just grew. The kids got older. They came to a lot of classes. And then, of course, they were old enough and I could leave them at home with my husband and not worry. And I started doing yoga on and off, on and off. But you know what? I wasn't taking it seriously. I was taking it as a form of exercise, a way to lose weight, and also, of course, a way to relax because I was a very busy mum and had a couple of part-time jobs, etc. But it was only when the universe decided to give me a massive kick up my backside, and the way that showed itself was through physical trauma in my body. So everything manifested in quite a debilitating illness. So I started showing endometriosis signs, which weren't properly diagnosed for a very long time. I kept on being sent away with paracetamol and told I was a busy, stressed mum, but living on painkillers in order to cope and manage on a daily basis. And so going through all of that, I then had surgery number 1, which wasn't very successful. Within 11 months, I had to have another surgery. And the surgery, it changed me so much because I dropped to a big, deep, dark well. Body confidence, physical ability to move. I know I was depressed. I know I was depressed as well. And, it just was a downward spiral. And then it didn't end there. I had trouble at work, of course, because I had so much time off. And then 3 more traumas followed. I fell down the stairs without recovering yet and fractured my right ankle. I then, a few months later, burnt my right side with boiling hot water. And then the cake, or the cherry on top of the cake, was a car crash. Whoa. Yeah, all of that brought me slap bang in the face of Rina Rawal. If you do not pick yourself up and make some major changes that your soul is screaming at you, but you know what? You don't want to listen. You're going to be in a place you don't want to be in. And you know what? The universe brings you the answers, Urmi. It really does. And lo and behold, you won't believe the answer was a yoga teacher training course. I mean, come on. It had to take a crazy circuitous route like that for me to listen to what I should be doing.
Wow, that is definitely a lot of shouting. To get you to listen to you. That's so much for your body physically, and then the impact mentally. And then you moved on to the yoga teacher training course. And what year was that?
So that would be 2013 to 14 is when I was petrified, but I just thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to have to take the bull by the horns and just do this course. I was scared. I was working full time. I just finished a master's degree and I had 3 kids. I mean, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
So let's just go back. While you were working, you had 3 kids. You finished, was it your master's or your MBA?
My MBA.
So you did your MBA, and this is all happening while all the other trauma events that you described happened as well.
Yeah, the MBA finished in 2010 and a lot of the pain was showing. My health was really bad then, but I'm a very good person, and I think many of us women are, especially Asian women, at shoving everything down and putting the lippy on, getting our hair up in a ponytail and getting on with the damn thing. So I was just getting on with it, but it was there. It was all bubbling and I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, high five to that, definitely. Oh, wow. So Tell me, apart from the fact that you were really scared because you were going to start this course, which is something that you're familiar with, but you're still scared of the unknown, what was the course like? What was the actual training like for you?
Well, picture this. I start the training, but my ankle is still not healed. So I'm in a big fat boot. All the other students who joined the course are all physically able to move fully and do everything I couldn't do. So that was difficult in itself. And the course, oh wow. Do you know what? If somebody thinks an MBA is difficult, forget it. I have never, ever known something so challenging as the yoga course that I did, because I had to dismantle so much of me and dismantle so much of my ego tendencies that I hated every minute. I was a reluctant yogini. But I tell you something, it taught me so much about myself. It taught me so much about myself. And I rose to it though, because I love learning. I love learning, hence me wanting to go back and do my MBA. And what I did was, even though it was difficult, I threw myself in fully and I wouldn't let up. And I was very anal about it, down to how organized my folder had to be. It had to be color coded. It had to be organized. My papers had to be neat and tidy. I was OCD about my learning. But I think it was a good thing because it allowed me to organize what was a very busy life. However, the one thing that I did find about the course was that I was very harsh on myself. And in hindsight, I was overly harsh. I was using so much of my masculine tendencies and not giving myself enough love and compassion. But it's okay, because that was part of that process. But what I loved about the course was the depth of the spirituality and the authenticness of it. So unfortunately, as you know, and I'm sure loads of people out there have seen it, you can become a yoga teacher by going to a couple of courses over a couple of months. And, you know, the whole emphasis is on physical yoga practice or asana practice. And that is just a tiny little part of it. But what I loved about our course was it went to the core of yoga, about spirituality, about metaphysics. It went right to the core and about challenging you yourself as a human being, coming onto the platform and wanting to teach another human being before you even have an understanding of yourself. And I think that's what I loved about the course. So yes, it was hard and yes, it was challenging, but I liked the authenticness of it. It was a bit like the way you might be taught in India in an ashram situation. Nobody cut you any quarter. Our teacher did not cut us any quarter, but actually I think he did us a lot of favors because we had to face the truth and learn from the bottom up, if you like, or from the core outwards. I hope that makes sense.
That does indeed. That does indeed. And I think you actually touch on something quite significant, and which is the fact that the asanas are just a small part of the actual learning. However, the culture that we live in has become so, it's commonplace for me to see someone who is incredibly fit and healthy body wise to be contorting themselves in all these different funky shapes and positions. But I feel like that's taken away from the importance of the breathing and the importance of understanding the significant spiritual kind of learning within that. What is your take on that? On the, you know, you mentioned it briefly, you know, when you said that it's easy to get a yoga certificate, you can do a course online. But how much of those courses are really reflective and understanding that spiritual side? But generally, do you have a view on the whole, I kind of want to call it the hijacking of one aspect of yoga? I don't know if you know, do you have a view on that? Because that, funnily enough, that is actually one of the things that has always put me off of going to an actual yoga class. I'll do it at home, but that's been one of the main things when I think about it. But yeah, share. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that point.
Urmi, do you know something? I'm delighted you've brought that up. I'm so glad we can open a spotlight on some of those issues or those issues that you're talking about. And you are one of many when you say to me, that's what puts you off going to a class, because this is what a lot of my students say to me, but also I've experienced it. And for me, it is so true. I think Instagram, beautiful bodies, an incredible location, and let's not forget the gorgeous leotards or leggings or things that we're then going to tag. Sorry if I sound cynical. All of these things are giving people, I believe, the wrong interpretation of yoga. It does yoga a disservice in my mind, because that imagery is exclusive. It's not inclusive. And I'll just elaborate on that. I see yoga as a gift to humankind. It's a gift to humankind. And it's a little treasure trove of solutions, everyday practical solutions that help us navigate the stormy seas of our lives, because none of our lives run smoothly. And we talk about yoga as a union, don't we? It's a union on so many levels, Urmi. So simply on a level of mind, body and breath, of course, we want to have union there, but also our individual and human consciousness or inner self, and that union that we all crave ultimately with universal or cosmic consciousness or higher self. But the other thing that people tend to do with all of this social media and other imagery, which I think is driven by commercialism, is we don't want to use the word God. We don't want to use the word creator. We don't want to use the word spirituality. We want to make yoga vanilla so that it's commercially comfortable for people. One size doesn't fit all. And that's the beauty of yoga. It's not one size fits all. It's about you finding tools within it and creating your own unique yoga journey and experience. And yoga is experiential at the end of the day. So for me, therefore, each individual's experience or observation is not only valid, it's valuable. And I think we forget all of that in this whole hijacking. And the other thing is, I'm very averse to anyone saying only this type of yoga is the best. That's rubbish. There is room for all forms, just like there is room for all forms of human beings, color, size, etc., 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 right? And how boring would life be if we only had one type of flower or one type of tree? No, yoga has many types, and there's room for all traditional yoga, and there's also room for variations or iterations or whatever the word you want to use, evolutions of yoga, as long as we remember its core. And its core is about our unity, the union between the self, the inner self, and the higher self. And also, do you know what? The asana practice, as we just touched on, the pair of us, is only a minuscule amount. It's really the physical practice is about keeping our bodies healthy and strong so that they can house the thing that we should be doing, which is meditation and pranayama or breathing practices that help us cultivate an awareness of our inner selves so that we can then look towards merging or moving towards the higher consciousness. That's what I feel about it. And I think, the other thing people have to remember is that yoga is about you. And I get really upset. I get so upset when you hear students that come in and, the yoga class is about the teacher, or the yoga class is about the click, or the yoga class is about the mat, or, the Tibetan bowl I bought, or the leggings I'm wearing. It's so upsetting, Urmi, because we are all in need. We're broken. We're hurt. We're reeling. We're recovering. We're grieving. We're lonely. So many of these emotions that we talked about earlier, so many of these things we are facing, we need to be able to feel when we walk into any yoga class that all of that is okay. You start from where you are, from what you can do, and that's enough. That's enough. Why are we forcing people to be any more than that? Because what they bring is beautiful enough. And we begin there.
That was amazing. And everything that you said makes absolute sense. And thank you for bringing up the point about variations or the different types of yoga, because that was actually going to be one of my next questions. So in terms of the different types of yoga, there have been some incredibly high profile cases around these abuses of power. I don't know if you're, the whole thing with the Bikram yoga is just one example of all the different issues that come up. You talk about commercialism as well, and I think you're absolutely spot on. It's quite raw. It's very raw.
I think it is when you have some of these high profile cases like the Bikram yoga. It's very upsetting. As a yoga teacher, I find it very upsetting because unfortunately it brings up the wrong, if you like, the wrong image again, or the wrong view of what yoga is. But I don't think it's a yoga problem, Urmi. I think where people use their power for bad purposes or to control others or to carry out such abuses, it's across all sectors. Sectors like we've seen it on television. We've seen Jimmy Savile, for instance. We've seen it in some of the charity sectors, haven't we? Oxfam, etc. Unfortunately, these type of people know exactly what to do. They know where they can do it. And they also have such a high understanding of manipulating others that they can hide behind that facade of being incredibly good at what they do. And it's scary. I find it scary. And I think the other thing about yoga that people have to understand is that when you walk into any yoga situation, classroom with any person, if it doesn't feel right, listen to yourself. Listen to your inner voice. And I think we don't, because we think that somebody in authority knows better than we do. And we're afraid. Of course we're afraid. And maybe our experiences prior to that will also colour our ability to be able to speak our truth. So I don't know. I mean, that's how I feel about it. But, from a practical perspective as well, when I had my training course, we were taught about permission, we were taught about respect, and we were taught about judging that situation. So understanding from a physical touch perspective, you should be asking permission. Is it okay if I adjust you? Would you like me to show you how you can move your shoulder, for instance, to get more comfortable or to breathe better? And I think if you are not being given some of those things in your yoga class, maybe reassess it, or maybe have a chat with your teacher and, say, actually, you know what, I don't want you to adjust me. I know that in some classes, they actually have these wonderful little discs where you can put them down on the floor and the disc says, yes, please adjust me, or no, thank you, I'm okay, that sort of thing. So I don't know.
No, that I totally understand. And I think you're right. There's a lot of abuse of power, or power being just used negatively. I am really interested to understand more about your students, because you've mentioned them a few times while you've been talking. So, because I know as a teacher, you get this feedback from students all the time. And what is it like? What has been the general feedback that you've been getting from students when they come to your lesson? And you're an incredible spiritual person, and that kind of comes across all the time. And is that one of the things that you really want to be able to help your students to understand and navigate, the spiritual part and the physical side? And is that part of the kind of helpful feedback you get back to them? What are the takeaways that they get from you where they've been able to implement them, not just in their yoga learning, but in everyday life?
Yeah. I have spoken about my students. I've mentioned them a few times as we've spoken, because they allow me a window, maybe once or twice a week whenever I see them, a window into their world, a window into their vulnerability, a window into their coping at that time. And I will always be so grateful for that. But I feel so humble because I feel that I've been given that chance, that opportunity to be able to do that. And when they come into classes, when I have new students, they'll say the type of things you said, which is, they felt like their yoga teacher didn't adjust them, for instance, or, was trying to do a headstand on the first day or whatever it is. It's usually the physical side that has put them off. The fact that they have been thrown straight into something, but their body hasn't been comfortable with it, but nobody's asked them, is it okay for you to do this? The other thing is, I think what the feedback I get is that they like that I come from their place. If what I mean by that is wherever they're at is where we begin. And I think that's important. So wherever they're at is where I begin my work with them. And I always emphasize that there must be patience, love, and compassion for their body first and foremost. But love is always top on my list. So work with love, work with compassion, work with patience, and work at your pace. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing on the mat next to you. And in fact, it doesn't matter what I'm doing either, because you need to follow what you need to do in that moment. And that's enough. And that's important. And so when I get people coming back and talking to me afterwards, they'll say, oh my gosh, Rina, I really needed to stretch that way today, or I really needed that relaxation because you know what, I've had a really bad week. But the other feedback I get, which is really interesting, and I think this goes deeply to the root of spirituality, is when we're trying to be our spiritual beings or be close to being what is our spiritual being or authentic soul self, our energies resonate, I think, on the same plane or the same frequency. And your students feel that. They know when you're not being authentic and real. And when you resonate on that, I think you make this connection, this union, which is what yoga is all about. And what they'll say to me is I'll bring up a topic. So say, for instance, I bring up the topic of forgiveness, for instance, and my theme that day will be all around forgiveness for yourself and for others. Somebody will come to me at the end of class and say, and sometimes they're in tears, they'll say, I really needed that today because I'm actually managing or grappling this issue at the moment, and it's affecting me in this way mentally, it's affecting me this way emotionally, and it's affecting me this way physically. And that's it, Urmi. It's that connection. And so sometimes I don't think you need to say it. Do you know what I mean? I think it will manifest itself in that room, in that yoga room. You will make those connections as long as you are listening to your authentic self or your soul. And I do openly talk about spirituality. I openly welcome it, encourage it, and give it space. However, I don't push it down anyone's throat because we all have our space on the continuum of our journey, and somebody might not be there yet, and that's okay. So their opinion or their experience is also valid and valuable. And I also openly talk about God. I do. And I'm not ashamed. I talk about God and I talk about love, and, it's okay. It's okay. There's room for all of it.
That sounds absolutely amazing. It seems like when a student comes to you and is able to explain to you that this is how I'm feeling and this is what I've needed, you've basically almost like helped them, and they themselves have reached a different level of awareness in their own journey and their experience. So that's incredibly powerful.
I agree with you. I think it's about them, that individual soul, unraveling itself. It's nothing to do with me. We yoga teachers, we're just tools, not in a bad way, in a good way. We're just a little tool. We're just a little prod in one direction and little poke in another direction. And that's what we are, we're just there to help that individual find that radiance, find their journey and work through it the best that they can, because our capacities change all the time, don't they? We can't be strong all the time and we can't be weak all the time. It goes up and down. And it's just allowing them to do experiential yoga, right? Experience it and observe it for themselves.
I have a question, and I'd be really intrigued to know if you're able to answer this. But while you've been, through your journey, through your training, and even every day, what have you learned about your body? And has there been a point or a moment where you've been kind of not so much the feeling amazing after yoga, but has your body been able to move in a certain way where you kind of went, oh my gosh, wow, that's possible. That's amazing. Has that happened?
That's a very good question. Yes and no. And I'll explain the no. I said to you earlier that I was a reluctant yogini. And the thing I struggled with most was connecting to my physical body. Spiritually, I could connect to myself because I think that comes quite naturally to me. Emotionally, I found it easy to connect with myself. But I just had this barrier with my physical self. And for a long time, I'm going to use the word hate. And that's a very strong word, and I don't use it lightly either. But I was in a relationship of hating my physical body. It wouldn't do what I wanted it to do. For goodness sake, just get into that pose already. But it wouldn't do it. And then slowly it started unraveling. I started learning. And the thing that happened was awareness, and the unfolding ability to love whatever my physical body could do. And the more I practiced, I started getting exactly what you're talking about, those aha moments of, oh my God, this is what it feels like for me to do this downward dog, fully aligned to my intention, to my breath, and to my mind. But dipping into the spiritual pool at the same time. Wow, this is what it feels like. And yes, I've had several of those moments, but they're fleeting, because unfortunately, the limiting beliefs that I still hold and I'm working on will raise their ugly heads again. The imagery of Instagram and other things will raise its ugly head again. And I'm back to fighting the physical. So I think it's a constant attempt to find the balance and the harmony, and a constant attempt to create that union. But I do think that when I release myself and surrender, and that's the word, surrender to the moment, all of it aligns. And I think that's the thing. That's the thing I'm learning about it.
Thank you for your honesty, because what I really take away from that is the fact that you're absolutely authentic in your teaching. So you're actually saying, these are the hang-ups that I have, and yet it's okay for you to have them because I have them too. But that makes it real. I actually want to come to your classes now. So this is what I am quite interested. But I guess the other thing is because you started your yoga training with your injury, now how do you kind of work with people who have a physical challenge, limited mobility, potentially disabilities or injuries? Because from our conversation, I can see that the physical is one aspect, but there's a significant mindset here as well, as mindset aspect to this. So you said you start where your student begins. And so how would you adjust the movement or adjust the practices to work with them?
Yeah, you're right. Through, the fact that I started my yoga teacher training with a fractured ankle or a healing fractured ankle, and all the physical traumas my body has been through, I think I have understood how awful one feels, in this cage that we call our body, and all the terrible emotions of, lack of self-worth, low body confidence, etc., can really have a huge impact on your mental health. Forget about anything else. And so when a student comes to me and they want to come to the class, I always have phone calls with them, and if I can, a face-to-face. I don't rely on email. And I will spend time, and it doesn't matter how long that conversation is, understanding their journey. So I ask them to openly and honestly and in confidence tell me what's going on for them physically, mentally, and emotionally, and what's gone on prior or led to that, so that I can get a background to that soul that's going to walk into my classroom potentially, but also to the pain that they might be in. And that you need to be able to understand that. So when they do come to the actual classroom setting, I've already got an understanding. Of course, I've understood the physical limitations and, the contraindications. In other words, what can be done, what can't be done, what would, be comfortable, what would exacerbate their condition. So of course, I understand all of those things. And when they walk in, for me, the most important thing is they have got to feel welcomed. They have got to feel like they are the only person in my class and they have my full attention. The other thing they've got to know is that I am going to give them love. I'm not going to hide that. And so I'm big on hugs with permission, of course, not under COVID, of course. And I also, with permission again, am big on touch. So if I'm going to go and adjust somebody, of course, I'll ask them if it's okay and then I'll adjust them. But I set an intention in my mind as well. When I'm going to adjust or do something with someone, I'll make sure that I'm trying to be in that spiritual and love zone, but also compassion and patience, because I've got to work from where they are. And then adjustments that they might need would be, perhaps if we're doing 2 or 3 repetitions of something, maybe they can only do 1. And you know what? That's okay. The other thing is they might need a prop. So, it could be a cushion, it could be a block, whatever it is. So whether they're on the mat or not, they might need something just to help them. And also they may need more rests. So I make sure that if they need the rest, they know it's okay. It's okay to stop. I'm also a chair yoga teacher as well. So I do work directly with people who have different abilities, but also have varying health conditions and chronic illnesses that they're trying to manage. So, again, we work at a level that's slower, that focuses fully on the breath and that focuses on doing what you can in that moment. And, I think that's what yoga is. It really isn't. Sorry to keep going back to it, but being able to do a handstand in a week, it's not about that. It's about drawing mind, body, and breath to that moment. And that is your yoga practice. I'd argue that.
So just to add, me trying to do a handstand is a health and safety hazard. So I just don't think it's wise. I mean, I don't think I've been able to do one since I was possibly 9. Thank you. So obviously, with the pandemic and the way that things have been, you've moved your classes online. And I'd like to know, well, firstly, if you would let our listeners know where they can find out more about you. And then also just kind of touch on a little bit about what the online offer is, if you don't mind.
Not at all. So you can find me at www.yogawithrina.com, and at my website you'll see my social media button, so you can click and you're more than welcome to join me on my social media pages and join the community. But also I've got my classes on there, which is the chair yoga that I do and the hatha yoga. I'm actually based in and around Harrow with my classes. But with my online classes, of course, the offering is that I do chair yoga and hatha yoga, anything from 2 to 4 times a week. And again, it doesn't matter what level you're at. I love teaching beginners as well as those who are intermediate. And, you can join me online because, we can still practice our yoga together. We can still feel like we are a community, even though we're online during COVID. And more than ever, Urmi, I know this is being said everywhere, but we really need this. We need this because people's mental, physical, and emotional health is really being knocked this year. And we need things like the online yoga to be able to help us navigate through to another side. And we don't even know what this other side is going to look like, but we'll get there together.
Make sure you join us next week for a new episode on the Transformation series. Remember, finding you really does matter.